You're welcome.
Not just join.
Can you help the panel get up as I'm talking? The camera won't see it.
So that the
But
what?
just making sure they come on up and get seated because I'm going to need to get started. Good morning, everyone. If I can have everyone here in the studio have a seat. It's wonderful to see a full house here in Studio 919. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to those joining us here at Texas Tribune Studio 919 here in downtown Austin and online for today's event titled The Texas Economy, the Interconnected Future of San Antonio and Austin. I'm Matt Ewalt, the Texas Tribune Senior Director of Events and Live Journalism. The region stretching from San Antonio to Austin is experiencing frenetic development, exponential population growth, and increased economic significance. That brings opportunities and challenges. Today, we've convened the region's top economic development leaders for a conversation on the interconnected future of Central Texas, Texas's next hotspot for growth and development. Our moderator for this event is Henry Cisneros, former mayor of San Antonio and former U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Our panel includes Mike Kamerlander, President and CEO of Greater San Marcos Partnership, Ed Latson, CEO of Opportunity Austin, Jonathan Packer, President and CEO of Great New Braunfels Chamber of Commerce, and Jenna Saucedo-Herrera, President and CEO of Greater SATX. Before we begin today's program, I would like to acknowledge today's sponsors. Our major sponsors include Frost, Texas Water Utilities, USAA, and Endeavors. We are also very grateful for the support of KGB Texas Communications in helping us to convene today's conversation. Though corporate sponsors and donors underwrite this event, they play no role in determining the content, speakers, or line of questioning. Yesterday was Giving Tuesday, and we're grateful to all of those who provided support yesterday and continue to support the mission of the Texas Tribune. We thank those Texas Tribune members who are joining us in person and online today. If you're not yet a member, please consider a contribution, no matter the amount, to support thoughtful reporting on issues impacting Texans. You can show your support by going to texastribune.org/donate and donating today. Today's program runs 1 hour with approximately 45 minutes for our panel discussion and 15 minutes for your questions. We'll welcome questions from our audience here in Studio 919, and we'll ask questions on behalf of those joining us online. Please visit our Q&A portal at texastribune.org/ask to submit your questions and let us know where you're joining us from. Before we begin today's program, let me briefly introduce our panel. Our moderator, Henry Cisneros, is chair of the infrastructure investment firm American III. He is also vice chair of the board of directors and equity owner of Shank Williams Cisneros & Company, LLC, and principal of Siebert Williams Shank & Company, LLC. He was mayor of San Antonio from 1981 to 89 and secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development under President Bill Clinton from 1993 to 97. And now our panelists. Jenna Saucedo-Herrera is the president and CEO of Greater SATX, a regional economic partnership charged with growing and diversifying the 8-county San Antonio New Braunfels MSA. Mike Kamerlander is president and CEO of the Greater San Marcos Partnership, and he formerly served as director of Lockhart Economic Development. Ed Latson is the CEO of Opportunity Austin. Previously, he founded and served as director for ARMA, the Austin Regional Manufacturers Association. And Jonathan Packer, president and CEO of the New Braunfels Chamber of Commerce, representing more than 1,600 businesses. We are grateful that all of you join us today for this critically important conversation, not only for the region, but for the state of Texas. Before we begin today's program, I want to welcome, we're going to continue. Sonal's not going to make some comments this morning. I would, just in a matter of time, like to turn it over to today's program and Secretary Cisneros.
Matt, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your kind words of introduction of all of us, but also for the work of Texas Tribune. I remember when Evan Smith left his impactful run at Texas Monthly Magazine to create Texas Tribune. It was a very novel idea at the time. It's subsequently been copied in other cities and states across the country, but provides a very important service within the state. And of course, for Austin, the Texas Tribune Fest is a must-attend event. Every year, people come from all over the state to participate. And this, I understand, is a kind of a spin-off from the fest to carry on throughout the year. And this session today is a starting session for what will be a series of such events. Welcome to all of you who are present today. If you have any difficulty sort of keeping track of who's up here, think geographically. We start with Ed from Austin, then we go to Mike from San Marcos, then we go to Jonathan to New Braunfels, and we end up in the southern part of the region with Jenna from San Antonio. So we're laid out here like a map for you on the stage. Let me say just a few words of introduction to the topic, because the topic really is Austin, San Antonio, but that needs to be said in some context, which is the new economy, the new demographic reality of Texas. Texas, of course, the second largest state in the country. Many people think of it as a land of wide open spaces and ranches and oil wells, but that belies the reality of Texas as an urban state. It has 26 metropolitan areas, which is more than any other state, but California, which has one more. But there isn't another state in the country that has 3 cities ranked within the top, 4 cities ranked within the top 10 most populous cities in the country. Houston at number 4, San Antonio at number 7, Dallas at number 9, and as of about 3 months ago, Austin at number 10. Sitting at number 13 most populous city in the country is Fort Worth. Never in the history of the United States has there been such an urban concentration in one single state. There were various times in American history where states had 3 states within the top 10, but never 4. And that's now the reality of Texas. The truth of the matter is that 66% of the population of Texas lives in just 35 counties. And those are the 35 counties that group around the 3 corners of the Texas Triangle. Dallas-Fort Worth in the north, Houston-Galveston in the southeast, and Austin-San Antonio in the southwest. If we ranked these places by the size of their economies and compared them globally, Houston would have an economy by itself, Houston Metro, the size of the country of Belgium. Dallas-Fort Worth would have an economy the size of Sweden. And Austin-San Antonio would have an economy together about the size of the nation of Egypt. Nowhere else in the country are 3 metro areas, large mega regions, in that close proximity to each other within the same state. It doesn't exist elsewhere in the country. This is becoming a global phenomenon because of the significance of each of these places in their own right. It's not the purpose today, so I won't go into length, but when you think of the Port of Houston and the 2 airports there, DFW Airport, the technology growth in Houston, of course, it's the biomedical sector, the petroleum sector, the energy sector, and then Austin, San Antonio, with the University of Texas, the state capital, the technology base here. Now an automotive cluster between us, Toyota and Navistar in San Antonio, Tesla here, San Antonio's own biomedical emphasis and cybersecurity. This is a place, the Triangle, that legitimately is a pinnacle among the major metros of the world, and it's only going to continue. Today we want to focus on Austin, San Antonio, and that's a region that I like to say runs from Pflugerville to Floresville. Pflugerville in the north, which includes the Leander, Georgetown, Round Rock complexes, and others. Of course, Austin itself, the fastest growing city in America over the last decade. Literally, jobs counted, Austin was number 1, Nashville was number 2, San Antonio was number 3 in percentage rate of job growth over the last decade. That's a phenomenon in and of itself. Hayes County, just south of us, which is San Marcos is the seat of one of the fastest growing counties in America. Just south of that, and of course, there is Texas State University, which many people don't know is a home to about 35,000 students. New Braunfels, Comal County, in its category, one of the fastest growing counties in the country, and San Marcos, one of the fastest growing cities. I had the opportunity to interview the former mayor of New Braunfels recently, Rusty Brockman, and it's about 100,000 population now. He showed me data that it will be by 2030 about 200,000 people, which takes it from small town New Braunfels to something else, something like we think of Plano or Richardson in the Metroplex. And then San Antonio itself, as I say, the third fastest growing. The region as a whole today, that expanse that I just described, is home to about 5.2 million people. Few people think in that way, but there's a central Texas concentration of about 5.2 million people. By 2050, which sounds like forever, but it's 27 years from now, go back 27 years, and you're in 1996. So that gives you just a little bit of a feel for how soon that will come. By 2050, the region will have 8.3 million people. We're going to grow by 3 million more people between the northern parts of Austin, through Austin, San Marcos, New Braunfels, and San Antonio. About 3 million more people in that time frame. 8.3 million people is larger than the Metroplex of Houston today and larger than the Metroplex of Dallas today. So to put in perspective what we're going to watch happen is roughly the kind of combination that you see in DFW or in Houston today. Obviously, the region has challenges. I would say most everybody would agree that the top two are mobility, that is to say transportation, congestion, and dealing with the flow of people across this region. But also water is a substantial issue because we live in water-scarce region, made more complex by climate change, the implications of potential drought, and so forth. Other challenges include housing, which sounds like a solvable problem, but I have watched with my own eyes as a former HUD secretary, regions be choked by rising housing prices and the inability to persuade young workers to come and live there. I was participated in a conference in Silicon Valley where you could predict the end of the boom based on the inability to produce adequate housing and price it at prices that people can live. It's almost surreal to talk to young people, young professionals with great educations and top caliber technical abilities in Silicon Valley who live in small, crowded apartments, and that is absolutely the best they can do. It's just an impossible situation. Workforce issues, workforce training, energy, although we're doing very well with respect to renewables, both in Austin and in San Antonio, leading the country in the percentage of our total energy generated by renewables. Environment, really important issue. There's a man named Gary Merritt here I noticed in the audience who is the creator, the Imagineer behind the Great Springs Project that would link Barton Springs in Austin through a series of contiguous streams and creeks to the Blue Hole, which is the origins of the San Antonio River. 75 miles of trails and greenery and creeks and springs, which is a fantastic idea. But I think the critical point is it has to be done, and it has to be done now if it's going to be done, because all of this land is going to be built up, and it's just going to be impossible to do open space things if we don't consciously do them now. So that is just a quick overview Let me just say, for me, the critical question is, we know we're going to grow. We're going from 5 million people to 8 million people. That is a fact. Are we going to allow that to be haphazard, eclectic, congested, environmentally toxic as a form of growth, where we'll look back and say, how did we let this happen? How could we make such a mess? Or is this something that can be coordinated with integrated thinking and planning? We don't have any structure right now for thinking in an integrated, coordinated way. We have chambers of commerce independently. We have economic development efforts independently. We have city governments at work all throughout the region, but no overarching thinking about how do we make this Central Texas region something that we can be proud of, that the world can see and say, if urban growth is the destiny of mankind, then Austin, San Antonio is where they've done it right. And that's what I think we want to try to accomplish. Let me begin the questioning here by asking each of our participants to just say a word about their view of the significance of regional thinking. Is this concept valid? Is this a real deal that's happening? And let me just start with my friend and colleague in various roles over the years, Jenna, who is a star in San Antonio and has reoriented the economic development effort in San Antonio to a more regional concept. Please, if each of you would just in turn share a thought about the big overarching idea.
That opening level set for us, I think, I'm sure I speak on behalf of my colleagues here as well, that it just gets me more excited about the opportunity that we have for the broader mega region. My answer to you is very simple. The mega region is real. The mega region exists whether we're thinking about it or not, right? People are voting with their feet and flocking to the state of Texas, and most certainly relocating to this I-35 corridor. And so it is already happening. I think it's incumbent upon us as economic development leaders to think about that real opportunity to lean in to that mega metro approach, whatever that looks like. And you eloquently cited some of our challenges, right, in our respective locales, and then the opportunity. And I think that as economic developers, we almost have to be eternal optimists, right, about what we're doing. But I also think it's important that we are very transparent about our challenges, right? Because being an eternal optimist makes us good at our jobs, at selling as the chief salespeople, right, of our respective locales. But I think what makes us great is the ability to lean into product development. And if our product is the San Antonio region, or our product is the Austin area, or the product is the broader mega region, what are those challenges that we have to address? And then even more specifically, what are those opportunities that will differentiate us, not just in the state of Texas, not just in North America, but around the world. And I truly believe that mobility is something, whatever the technology might be. I think we get hung up around roads and highways quite a bit, and I think that's certainly the direct means. But I think that we've got to more holistically think 50 years ahead what we want this mega region to look like. But the short answer is the mega region exists, and the regional collaboration and partnerships exist today as well.
There's a couple of points Jenna made that I'd just like to second. Number one is that our job and our work is that of optimism, to take a view of our community that is stubbornly positive, to be the institutions and the leaders that get your communities there. And I think we need to apply that not just locally, but regionally. And I think that's maybe where we're at today that's really unique, is that we're starting to feel that sense of ownership on that vision for the region. The second thing is the issues we face, while they feel inherently regional, transportation, water, et cetera. I think the key on the regional thing is that the solutions can only be regional across many of these fronts. So if we're looking after our communities, and if we're trying to put them in the best position to succeed, and the solutions are regional to the biggest issues we're talking about, then we should engage regionally.
Mike.
I agree. I think all four of us up here today is proof positive that this collaboration is occurring. I don't know this would happen 4 years ago or that the Texas Tribune would want to have this panel. I certainly agree. Regional, I mean, you mentioned water, Mr. Secretary. I mean, to bring water to this region is going to get more expensive and bigger. And as a regional approach, that's something we have to do. But as my time in Lockhart working on a big project like Micron was, I talked with Jenna about that project because certainly people in San Antonio were probably going to drive there and work there. People from Austin are going to go work there. It's a game-changing thing that we now have access to that site and resources to do that we didn't have. So everything we do is more regional today, and that's just the product of that growth that's occurred over this last decade in this corridor.
And your responsibility is San Marcos, but over to Lockhart and much of Hayes and Caldwell County, is that right?
All Hayes and Caldwell, so I-35, well, 290 all the way over to 130.
Yeah, good. Yes, sir. Ed.
Well, I think he did a great job setting the stage of the growth, but just to talk about it for a second in Austin terms, this has been an extraordinary 20-year period of time, where we've really led the nation in job creation, GDP growth. Over the last 5 years specifically, you think about the $1 billion of investment that have come from Tesla and Samsung and Apple and Oracle. It's been transformative, a very diversified economy. And I think what's the sense is that this is not the end of a great run. This is really the beginning of something extraordinary. And when I think about the frontier of that, the growth is really these two, these regions coming together and something that's going to be a force multiplier and carry the benefits to our citizens and the state. So I'm really excited about what's up ahead for us.
I want to go through one more run this way and ask you to take a minute and just give a few paragraphs on the highlight of what's happening in your place. And why don't we start with you and go back the other direction on the corridor. But just take a minute. The first question dealt with the region, your view of the region, the plausibility of the concept. But now tell us what's hot, what's happening on your job, what's on your front burner for you.
Well, I think from an economic standpoint, you see several factors really driving growth here. We have one of the most mature, developed semiconductor ecosystems in the United States. And obviously, with the geopolitical situation and some of the renewed interest in industrial policy from the federal government, we stand to benefit significantly from chips and what's happening in that space. So we see a lot of suppliers moving into the region. We see a lot of local companies expanding. And when we say that, we're talking about billions of dollars of expansion and multiple thousands of jobs being added in the space. And then also you see that in the automotive sector. 2 or 3 years ago with this investment from Tesla, adding a whole automotive sector to Central Texas, to the Austin region, it's just been extraordinary. And what it's helped us do is diversify our jobs. We've been very good at creating, college educated positions in this town, but this is really work that's available to people without college degrees and give them a pathway to the middle class. So I think that's very exciting. But, Austin has a long history of success in the innovative economy. We're growing our venture capital funded companies, and we're seeing successes there. So from an economic development standpoint, this is what I'm really excited about here.
So one of the things the audience should know is that 2 of the folks up here, Mike and Ed, are brand new to their jobs. 5 weeks and 1 week, I think. 2 weeks, okay. You're a veteran now. Say just a word about what people who are long invested in Austin and the region should know about your approach to this job. What should we expect from a person that we don't know in the corridors of power yet?
Well, I think one of the things I've always really valued about Austin and this region is the spirit of collaboration. And we have some great community leaders here, whether it be politically or in the economic development side or in the regional municipalities. And I want to make sure that we are all working together to solve our challenges, have shared objectives. And I think, part of the conversation today is extending what that regional collaboration really is. I mean, I think You see a zone of that spirit here, closer knit to the central Austin. But as we go forward in our tenure, I think you're going to see this group working much more closely.
Mike, talk about San Marcos per se, but also your approach to the job.
Sure. So this is my second week as president and CEO of GSMP, but I have been there before. I spent about 6 years at GSMP prior to this in the teens, so not new completely to the area. And ever since then, I think it's obviously the growth is what our communities have dealt with over the last decade, whether it's Texas State growing to now over 40,000 students.
40,000.
And the fifth largest university in the state. And thank you for all those that voted for the proposition last month or this month to help fund research there.
And a lot of communities that are in character suburban to Austin, but they're livable places in their own right.
Absolutely. Kyle, I mean, Ed mentioned Tesla, and just recently Tesla took 1 million square feet in Kyle. That's the type of regional reaction that we see from successes in Austin coming down our corridor. A mega site that we now have in the greater San Marcos region that we didn't have before is a new opportunity for large-scale economic development that these smaller communities haven't ever had to deal with.
Am I correct that San Marcos in particular has had a history of environmental sensitivity, responsibility because of the springs, et cetera? Do you see that as an element that is balanced somehow in Hays County growth?
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of the partnership is, yes, we're not too dissimilar from Austin in that environmental, and I think it's important and why people want to live in San Marcos is that exact reason, is the green spaces, the park, the river. But those types of issues don't exist in Caldwell County. There's not hill country, there's not the aquifers that exist over in Hays County. And so there's an opportunity to grow east into Caldwell County, and that's where we're seeing this growth occur.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that the audience ought to think about, is the topography of the region is very interesting. To the west is very sensitive, caverns, limestone, not likely to be heavily developed west of 35. Then there's the corridor itself, which is growing rapidly, 35. We'll talk about this more in a minute, but that spine cannot carry all of the traffic between Austin and San Antonio, just can't. To the east of 35, to SH 130 is sort of black land, developable land, and that's why we're seeing Seguin take off at the rate that it is. It's now becoming a manufacturing center. But all of that SH 135 corridor with, of course, the big 3/4 mile long plant, Tesla plant, along the highway is an amazing thing. So the topography here plays a role, and sometimes environmentally, sometimes as development opportunities, but it will be a factor here. Jonathan, New Braunfels. Tell us about New Braunfels.
Yeah, so in the context of New Braunfels, while I've been there longer in my position than Mike or Ed, I'm what's known as an Auslander. So, New Braunfels is a city that I think every Texan feels strongly is an important part of the state. It's a community with a lot of heritage based in a lot of the natural beauty from the topographical features just mentioned. And what's interesting, what's happened in New Braunfels is a community with that high quality of life, outdoor recreation, tourism amenities, is that that identity has proven to be remarkably elastic. It's something that maybe it's because New Braunfels is kind of baked into the DNA of Texas that so many people have chosen to be there, identify with it, and be accepted. But for a place with that high identity, high heritage, it's remarkably elastic. What we've seen, there's two indicators I'm going to talk about that if you look at New Braunfels on a XY chart compared to Austin, we lagged maybe 2/3 behind on these two indicators. And in 5 short years, we shot up about 2/3 to 75% of the way to the Austin line. The two indicators are bachelor's attainment rate. So in a short 5-year period, the gap between New Braunfels and Austin shrunk from about, I think it was, these numbers aren't going to be precise, but say 15% to 11 or 12%.
So what does that say? Educated young professionals are choosing New Braunfels as a place to live?
In our case, when you compare our growth rate to the mega region, the highest rates are under 18 and prime working years, 25 to 45 and 45 to 65. So it means credentialed people probably with jobs already and with children are choosing to live in New Braunfels.
And your second indicator?
Second indicator is the average cost of office. So the distance between office rates in New Braunfels and Austin narrow the gap about 75% of the way in a short period of time. And I think that's really interesting, combining those two.
Just as
data
a
points.
visual, do you think we're going to see like high-rise buildings along 35 at a New Braunfels node and at a San Marcos node along the way?
It depends on your definition of high-rise. I don't think we'll see 30-story buildings, but I think you'll have to address what our version of density is. We've got several catalytic projects proximate to our rivers that are going to see, just really transformative mixed-use development with hotel, office, and retail and residential as well.
Got it. Okay. Jenna, the elevator speech.
Very quickly, to keep us on track here, the story of San Antonio is one of momentum and alignment. And I can sit up here and talk about, headline grabbing projects like JCB on the manufacturing front, $30 billion of economic impact expected in our community, or growth in cybersecurity or bioscience. But what I'm most proud of, because I truly think that our progress and our efforts will yield transformative outcomes, is the alignment and investment. Think about our airport, right? About a $3 billion project to expand the airport. That's not a San Antonio project. That is for the region, right? We'll be adding 17 new gates, increased capacity. We are working as an organization with our partners at Visit San Antonio and the San Antonio International Airport on increased air service. We just landed our first transatlantic flight to Frankfurt, additional nonstop connectivity into Mexico. All of that work helps support existing businesses' growth, but also new business investment into the region. Beyond the airport, we're also investing big in downtown, about $3 billion worth of capital projects in the heart of San Antonio. And then we're investing in our people significantly. So an unprecedented program funded by taxpayers, not a new tax, but a reallocated tax to fund Ready to Work, which is basically a $250 million program to train San Antonians in the jobs that we're creating. So we're in essence underwriting or subsidizing that training for the demand occupation. So that level of investment and those types of projects require alignment, require people sitting down at the table saying, what are our needs? What is the employer demand? How do we fill the supply across the board from an infrastructure perspective? And so we're investing big in San Antonio. We're ready for current growth projections and even more.
So just to give the audience a feel for where we are logistically, with about 15 minutes to go, which is 15 minutes from now, I'll open the floor for questions. So prepare your questions to the group. But for the next 15 minutes, what I'd like to do is think of the challenges that we confront. But rather than go down the line and everybody answer, we'll do this sort of like brainstorming. I want to mention a problem, and anybody who has concrete thoughts, not generalities, but concrete thoughts about that problem, please speak up, and then we'll go through a range of things. Let's start with the obvious. Mobility, transportation for the region. What do we have to do? What's on the table? Anybody?
Alignment, partnership, Austin, San Antonio,
That's an
carrying our
abstraction.
weight. No, we need to carry our weight.
No, but I want to know
At the
a
legislative
specific
session.
project.
To be determined. But right now, do you have a specific project
Yeah,
in mind?
yeah.
Are you going to talk about the VIA?
No.
Okay, which one?
I would just say we can't leave 35 in the condition that it is.
Oh, yeah, high-speed rail. Easy.
And high-speed rail.
All the way down through Monterey. But
And-
to do that, we have to have influence. And right now, Austin, San Antonio does not have influence at the state level.
Can you imagine a region of 8 million people in 25 years relying on IH-35 as the spine for the entire metro in its present state? Maybe we can widen it, maybe we can double deck it, but that's all that does is attract more cars, as they have seen in California. We're going to need some kind of mass transit, including rail, and then develop SH-130 and 281 and crossroads in between. For example, at New Braunfels, I think it's 46, isn't it? That's discussed. So, Jenna, you've looked at the region. Is that roughly sound right to you in terms of specifics?
I think it's absolutely on point. And those are as big and grandiose as high-speed rail connectivity would be. I think those are tangible outcomes. I think there are additional technologies that we're not even contemplating today that we should be for an economy 50 years from now.
Autonomous vehicles.
Absolutely. Electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. I mean, all of the above. But today, some of these projects are very real. They were tangible. We were close. And I think we just have to continue in a line to get some of these nearer term objectives accomplished. But to your point, we also have to be thinking now about some of these bigger ideas.
What did 46 pretend to do at New Braunfels? It would connect 35 to SH-130 roughly. Is that was the idea basically, right?
There's two projects. There's the existing Highway 46 that connects 35 to 10, and that's a roughly $1.5 billion project that's not fully funded at this point, but well conceived. There's also the need for a connector from I-35 to SH-130, and that would be really smack dab in the middle of the corridor. That there was a bill this last session that unfortunately was unable to pass, but there's momentum there as well on both of those concepts.
So we have a problem in not getting the state to pass these projects, which are patently needed and obvious, right? What would it do to connect 35 and SH-130 at a practical level? It means you take some of the load off of 35 with an alternate route. It provides east-west passage through the heart of the corridor.
Yeah, I think there's the consumer benefits. I'd frankly love to hear the rest of the panel's thoughts on this, but my thoughts are that this idea of the high-tech 130 corridor, you create more capacity for that to breathe. Truly extending that corridor throughout the entire mega region just is really important.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, having a connector between San Marcos and Lockhart has always been discussed. And our two counties for the last 10 years have worked really well together on projects that do go around San Marcos, Highway 80 that goes from Luling to San Marcos. The Caldwell County is looking at how do they finance and do things partnering with 130 to get between Lockhart and San Marcos or Kyle, what's the right alignment? We're looking at that today to be ready for the next legislative session to work with 130 to make that happen sooner than later.
How serious are your constituents, and I mean business constituents, about rail? How serious? How imminent?
Very. And I think right now we're kind of muddying the waters between people and goods, right? But we need to move both, people and goods. And so the short answer is very serious at all levels, public and private.
And I'd add that, the Austin voters supported Project Connect, and we have mobility projects here underway. But I also wanted to commend our county judge. Indy Brown has also advocated for a train between Austin, San Antonio, the Valley, and Monterey. And I think that's the kind of big vision that would, be a game changer and allow workers and goods to flow between the region.
Yeah, I've been monitoring the Dallas-Houston high-speed rail, which is potentially the first credible, legitimate high-speed rail to be built in the United States. And it's moving forward. Amtrak is now interested and involved with Drayton McLean and the leadership of Texas Central. But they believe that is the north-south corridor. There doesn't need to be a north-south Dallas to San Antonio corridor because it's too expensive to have both going north-south. So that'll be the first leg of a triangle. What that means is if we're going to have an Austin-San Antonio connection, we need to do it on our own. It won't be some larger Texas Central corporate kind of thing. The leadership here is going to have to decide our future as a region depends upon having viable rail. Does that sound like a proper conclusion? The other sort of clear need is water. And San Antonio took some major steps forward in building what's called the Vista Ridge pipeline, which provides San Antonio with about 25% of its water supply above what it had before. We'd always been a city that relied just on the aquifer. This gave us water from Burleson County, brought about 150 miles in a massive pipeline, now bringing water to San Antonio with long-term contracts, 50 and 100-year contracts. Austin draws mostly on the Highland Lakes, and the drought of record in 1955 took the Highland Lakes way down. If that were to happen in the scenario we're painting of the rate of growth here, serious issues. Water. Tell me about it.
Well, I can tell you what I've been hearing, in our community is that there's a lot of recognition that San Antonio did something, very correct with planning for the water, and we have not had that kind of foresight here. It's something at Opportunity Austin we're going to be advocating for over this next year. And I think, you mentioned it, but one of the things that I think our mentality has to change on is that we're going to be facing bigger droughts and more extreme weather in the future, and our planning is going to have to account for it. So.
Yeah, I mean, that pipeline goes right through Caldwell County. We know right where it is. And so I think part of something that's helping draw this regional approach is water. As we were working on bigger projects that we've never seen before, the bigger GBRA and LCRA in our area had to go find more water or push projects they had 8 years from now to be able to serve these larger projects. Yeah. And doing so,
there's been some holding up of permits.
Yeah, and in doing so, they talked to other cities and got what they needed in water rights, and now those projects are moving forward anyway. So our economic growth is driving these utilities to do these larger projects.
Phoenix had to suspend housing permits for a time this last summer because there just wasn't enough water to allow the builders to build. I mean, they just couldn't give them the permits to have the water. There was no water to give. Jenna, what's been the impact of Vista Ridge for San Antonio?
I mean, Vista Ridge is unbelievable. By the way, that water source is closer to Austin than it is to San Antonio, and it's serving San Antonians, which is just fascinating. But the foresight to invest in Vista Ridge and those long-term contracts, I mean, water availability for at least the next 15 years plus, right? SAWS is a part of what I would say.
That's the San Antonio water system, SAWS.
Thank you for that. And CPS Energy and those providers. In our world, that needs to be table stakes. Available and affordable water, available and affordable power, reliable water and power, that's table stakes. If you can't get that right, we can't talk about a lot of the growth that we're discussing today. And so we're grateful. 10 years ago, we didn't have that answer on water. Today, I can look at our prospects straight face and say, we are good. We are good to go.
So let me just hit a couple of other quick areas quickly, just brainstorming fashion. I'll mention it and you tell me what you think. Housing as an issue in the region. Housing. Anybody want to speak to this?
You have a supply problem, and local governments need to think about supply.
And how do local governments do that? What does that mean? Does that mean encouraging developers with incentives? It means setting policies to spur housing development?
I think consider speed. I think that's really important. I think there's
eliminating barriers, permitting issues.
Yeah, you have to control your interest, but I think speed is just such a market force.
Where
on
do you
the supply
put
side.
affordability in that mix?
I think that's the big question most economic development groups are asking right now. That's an issue we're all working on, and I think that the best way to affect affordability at scale is to focus on supply.
I agree with that approach on housing, and certainly we have a problem with the speed of our development here in this region. I did want to point out something about affordability. The housing costs are high. It's about 20% more than the national average here. But our affordability, when you look at gas prices and groceries and actually cost of living, it's not really above the national average. It's about 1% more. So, I feel like if we can address the housing challenge, that we're going to be in a very beneficial place compared to other people in the region.
So in practical terms, what does this mean? More apartments, denser in the core cities, suburban developments in a greater part of the area, which of course then generates the need for transportation from those outlying areas. In practical terms, paint me a picture of what you think will happen or should happen in the region. Anybody?
Yes, I think it's all of the above. It's everything that you just outlined, and it absolutely has to be. And I think your comment was right on the mark as it relates to affordability with housing. I think at large, when we talk about the growth in this mega region, the conversation about affordability and cost of living and doing business is something that we all have to keep our eyes on for the foreseeable future across the board, not just as it relates to housing. That's one variable, but we have to think about that across the board as we continue to grow population, we continue to invest. But the short answer is yes, Henry, everything you outlined needs to happen.
Okay, another subject, environment/open space. I mentioned earlier the Great Springs Project as an indication of it's now or never. We either do this or it's not ever going to be. How does that fit into your thinking about economic development?
So GSMP last year launched a mapping tool where we worked with environmental groups to try and find those places that were important to them that we just wouldn't pitch, and come to kind of an agreement that these are important things for livability, for people who want to come set up an office park. Green space is very important. Let's identify those now. And then when we have companies come and want to be here, we don't have that issue moving forward. We've already identified them, and we'll work with them in our economic development efforts.
My guess is this is not a sidelight to economic development. This is like core to the identity of the region. People come here like they go to Denver or they go to Seattle because they're outdoors people and they love the hiking and they love the mountains and they love the streams. And Austin for sure has that reputation. San Antonio, because of the river and the creeks, has some of that reputation. Clearly, Comal and San Marcos do. So this is, as I say, not a sidelight, not an interesting thing to work on, but right at the core of why people would come here and how they identify the region.
It's absolutely in the core. So to provide you some data. So first of all, the number one criteria for CEOs when they're looking to invest in a location is access to people, right? And so if you dig further down into that, it's where do people want to live, right? Where do they want to relocate their families? So we actually conducted some research in our target audience, right? The specific age range that you referenced. And we surveyed them across the country, right? And the number one criteria for them was access to green space. We guessed internal to our office, we had a poll, we thought it would be, access to a job or cost of living. It was access to green spaces. And so that is informing both our product development, but also our outbound advertising and messaging campaigns.
Final issue before we get to the questions, and we're ready to do that, is the sensitive kind of amorphous issue of jobs, incomes, poverty, ethnic contentiousness because of inequity. Economic development, in my view, has always been the primary vehicle, and education, for addressing those subjects, for creating a region that's more cohesive because people see their income rising, they have hope, they want their children to advance, et cetera. How do you think about that in your economic development thinking? Anybody, speak up.
I think that's a huge issue and something I'm very interested in personally. We do not have a lack of jobs in this area, and a lack of good jobs. There's a lot of high-paying jobs. I think we need to make sure that it's local people, finding that opportunity. And we have a great workforce board with a master workforce plan that is addressing some of this. But if you get in the K-12 system or some of the people that are creating the pathways to help people get prepared for these jobs, I feel like there's more work that can be done. I don't feel like programmatically that there is a funnel for people to find this work. So that's a place I'm very interested in engaging.
Henry,
I think we have the opportunity to create a model here of how you take people who are marginalized and bring them into the middle class.
Absolutely.
by the way in which we offer economic opportunity.
Yeah, we do what we do as economic developers to drive economic mobility, to provide people pathways to prosperity. That's why we do what we do, and we wake up excited to go to work every day. The supply and demand equation that Ed was just talking about is very real. So we're working to create jobs. We have to make sure our people are ready for those jobs. And to your point, before we wrap for questions, to your point about being a model, we haven't even talked about the demographic profile of this mega region. And that in San Antonio, we're a majority Hispanic community, and we represent the future face of Texas and the country. If we can get it right here, we will be the model for the world.
Yeah, if I could add to that on the demographics, because nationally you have a shrinking workforce population, but that's not true in Texas. In Texas, we actually have a growing population, and the Hispanic community is part of the reason why we're growing, and it's such an asset to the companies that are moving here, and I think that's part of our marketability, as a mega region for sure.
So the subject of economic development sometimes is thought of as just fairly dry. It's jobs, it's incomes, it's site selection, it's persuasion of incentives for people to come. But it really is about people's well-being and their economic opportunity, their economic mobility, as you describe it, and the hope they have of creating a better life. And that's really what you guys do. And thank you for that. We are at the question time. Ladies and gentlemen, anyone who I really can't see you very well from here. Okay.
So we'll have folks come on over at the mic stand right over here. If you have questions, you can make your way.
And I want to
around
encourage Gary
here.
Merritt to come over and say a word, please.
I'd also remind folks that are joining us online, and we have hundreds who are joining us around the state, that you can ask your questions at texastribune.org/ask.
We'll not expect everyone up here to answer every question because we'll use all the time that way. But whoever feels like you have something powerful to say in answer, please take the floor. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Jan Gunter. I'm an accredited land consultant, and I have a question regarding the water. Your intro is so powerful. Jacob's Well is a great example of just the sadness of our water condition. It's dry. It's you know what the situation is, and so we're already behind the 8 ball in terms of that. San Antonio's pulling the water in from the rural communities whose wells are now, having to drop. I heard somebody this week say dropping a foot a month, I think it was, the well level. And so we're already behind that 8 ball. So what are we doing about that? What can we do about that?
Well, there is a concept. One of you please answer, but a concept called integrated water management that is being employed in places, particularly in the American West, that includes not just finding new resources to pump, but more intensive conservation measures, real new technological approaches to utilizing water, including recycling, massive recycling, high percentage of water recycled, not necessarily for drinking, but for gray water purposes. It can be used in golf courses and other places, so that then the drinking water is available for drinking. Also, things like pumping aquifers that have never been pumped before because they were thought as briny or shallow, but utilizing new techniques to use that water for other purposes. Places like Corpus are doing serious desalination, which is expensive, but in some parts of the country, Arizona and California, people doing it because the costs now justify doing it. So integration of a whole series of technologies is going to be part of our story, I think. Others' thoughts? That's not fair. The idea was for you to answer the question.
I think Robert Puente from the San Antonio Water System says it best. They're the only business around the world that actually incentivizes their customers to use less of their product. And so I think conservation, energy efficiency is a big part of that integrated management system.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Snyder. I'm with the Kyle Area Chamber of Commerce. With the growth that you're seeing and new businesses coming in, you're talking about job growth and prosperity. What types of trends are you seeing with wages and benefits from these companies?
Anybody?
Well, I can say, from my former role and leading a manufacturing association, we've seen wages go up tremendously in that particular sector. You're talking, 3 or 4 years ago being around $15 an hour to now being around $21, $22 an hour for, starting kind of frontline labor. And I think that says a lot. So I think you see wage growth in other areas too, but none more pronounced than that.
Specifically in our region, actually, our wages in Hays and Caldwell counties are outpacing Texas and actually Austin in general in what we're seeing coming in. And I think that's a direct benefit from what cities like Kyle have done to go attract the Teslas and other manufacturers to Kyle that we haven't had in the past. That's what's driving that. But our region specifically is outpacing most of Texas, if not all of it.
We look at where people live and where people work, and the reality for us is that we import low-wage labor and we export high-wage labor. So we focus on bringing jobs and people closer together as a simple concept.
I've been involved in economic development in San Antonio since 1975. That was an era when San Antonio was thought of as one of the poorest cities in the country. And in fact, legend has it in the 1960s, Peace Corps volunteers were sent here to learn, to San Antonio, to learn what third world conditions were before they were sent abroad. I can tell you that the model that these folks have described today works, just watching the transformation of San Antonio in terms of wages raised, middle class developed, neighborhoods integrated, a real sense of cultural integration in the community. It's a different place than it was in the 1970s. And while the economic development model we're talking about here is not perfect, there are people who would say it doesn't go far enough to educate or raise wages, et cetera. And there are flaws. We must do a better job on those scores. The only way in the American system to deal with issues of equity and income distribution problems is grow the economy, grow jobs, train people, and prepare them for those jobs. And that's what these folks do. Let me take a moment of personal privilege and ask Gary Merritt to just say a quick word. Gary is the creator of the Great Springs, and this is not an opportunity for an advertisement, but it is an opportunity for you to say why the concept of green space is important as we think about the region.
Thank you, Secretary. You said no advertisement, but will say that the way that we work is by working with not just Austin and San Antonio, but all of the cities in between. So 10 cities, 4 counties, 3 river authorities, chambers of commerces, EDCs, people on that stage, and others. And so we work to connect the existing efforts that are just along the lines of what you're talking about, people recognizing that green space is not just an interesting thing, but it's a needed thing for the continued support of this, where we have now, and the growth of this region. So we need more places for people to live and to work, and we need more places for people to be outside and to be connected. And so I have a couple of questions for the panel. One is, because we work with all of these different entities and people and landowners along the way, what do you see as the way to bring this together, to package it even more with regional impact? And then 2 is how to help to increase the message that this is not just a side note, but it is something that's integral to developing and protecting the quality of life for this region, for people to want to live here and work here.
Anyone have a thought you want to add to this?
Yeah, so quickly, we've got 4 minutes left here, but I think leverage the messaging that you heard today. Our job, right, is about making sure the region is the top destination for talent so that we can secure corporate investment, right? To do that, we need a great quality of place, and you're contributing to that. So oftentimes people get caught up into the economic impact and value of things, but don't forget the qualitative side of what you're doing, because it matters and we have data to prove it.
And Jenna, you should talk about the Arboretum that's in...
You should, yes. On the south side of San Antonio, you should definitely.
We're developing a 180-acre arboretum that focuses on the trees of Texas. It's on the Salado Creek in the San Antonio River watershed. An old golf course being transformed into a people's park, all about the great, majestic, noble trees of our region. So that's one addition to the jewels that are San Antonio's green space. Gary, by the way, is a really special human being. He was the county judge of Real County at 28 years of age, and he's taken the last 10 years and probably the next 30 years to do this Great Springs project. And he reminds me of one of those old-time visionaries who just has a vision, cannot be shaken from it, and is going to stay with it until he produces it. So
I want to make sure that we get to questions from a couple of our in-person attendees, but also ask a question coming in from online, and we'll go over just a couple minutes today. The federal investment in infrastructure is creating thousands of jobs in this megaregion. How are we going to organize and train the folks needed to build these large-scale infrastructure projects? How are we going to attract and retain new folks to the mobility and infrastructure space?
Let me just say one quick word about the training part, and I'll ask Jenna and others here to speak as well, because she mentioned it earlier, but not in this point that I want to make. San Antonio voters in November of 2020, the presidential election night, voted themselves a tax to generate 5 years of funding that would result in $154 million for training. We'd never had access to that kind of money before. Training was always done with federal money or school money or something, but never a pot of money to do training for the workforce, dislocated workers from the pandemic, and training for the future. It's a program called Ready to Work. It's at work now. I was with Mike Ramsey last evening. He's the head of it. He's on track, getting traction, moving, hard work, very difficult to reach down into the poverty neighborhoods and identify the people that ought to be getting some of the jobs. But that's an example of the answer to how we're going to, train people for infrastructure. Others on training.
We have a significant opportunity. The reality is that we have a high demand for technical trade training and a low supply of the training. The legislature this session passed a bill that allows for TSTC to build a campus in Comal and Guadalupe counties. So that's a major opportunity. It did not come with any funding at this point in time. So we're out there trying to get land and trying to secure funding, but that's a major opportunity.
Well, if I can add, so one of the challenges in this space is not necessarily having great training providers like here in Austin Community College is extraordinary. A lot of the problem is getting people to sign up for the training. I mean, there's so much opportunity in this region that, they might not be selecting into those particular career paths. And they also might not know how much money they can make in these kinds of roles and what kind of future they can have if they select it. So, one of the things that we've looked at is a marketing campaign that really helps inspire people to choose careers that help them have an affordable wage. We invested, over $500,000 in a marketing campaign called the Make It Movement, which is inspiring young people, to find this way. So I think it's a multifaceted challenge that's going to require, a sophisticated approach.
I would add one additional. I think the awareness piece is huge, right? And we have localized regional campaigns as well, specifically targeted for manufacturing. They have to realize that this is a career path, right? You can make a great living, get access to healthcare benefits, et cetera, for your family, ideally break down generational cycles of poverty. But beyond that, there are real issues that prevent, and Mike and our team at Ready to Work in San Antonio, they see this. You can cover the cost of training, but a lot of these folks are providing for their families. And so they still need some sort of stipend to live. It's not additive. They're having to pick between training that might be covered or providing for their families. And so we have to be very open-minded about the wraparound services to support these types of folks that are having to make those very tough decisions.
Thank you for having me. Very exciting conversation, and the time is dwindling, I know, so I'll try to make this very straightforward. Proximity and accessibility, these are the kind of the challenges we have with this rapid growth that's coming on. Technology's been driving transportation in terms of autonomous vehicles and terrestrial navigation, drone delivery devices, and so forth. But in the other area of our economy and healthcare, in education, and in the job workforce, we're seeing a different impact of technology in terms of distributed processes. Why are we not talking about the opportunity to overlay another level of infrastructure, secure networking across the region, and developing localized technology centers that would integrate not just the localization of jobs, but healthcare and ongoing education? It seems that that suits a better solution for a Kyle, for a New Braunfels, for a Joe, Hutto or Taylor, pick any of those communities, and at the same time having centers downtown Austin invites employers that have located outside of Austin to hire people locally in the city itself. But in this time where housing, two-income are required to pay for that, proximity is an issue. This is a way to start to close that gap.
Any thoughts on the issue of telemedicine, teleeducation, remote education as instruments of part of the equation here?
As part of the more rural area of the corridor, particularly in Caldwell County, that is very important.
Yeah.
And building out that broadband infrastructure, I know I'm happy to see the state take on more of a role in trying to make that happen in rural areas. And the county judge of Caldwell County is, the Commissioner's Court has put money towards building out that broadband infrastructure in more rural areas, and that's something we absolutely have to do because that is a dire need. So it is happening. It needs to happen faster, and it certainly will be something as transformative as electricity back in 1930s for Texas, and it's seen that way as by our elected officials.
One other quick point as we go to the next questioner, and that is that may be a really important tool, as you say, reaching out to more rural areas. I mentioned in my opening comments, 66% of the population of Texas lives in those 35 counties. That leaves the remainder of 254 counties in Texas with about 30-something% of the population. We have world-class medical centers, world-class education that can be, through these remote technologies, made available to people in the outlying counties in such a way that we don't create a rural-urban divide as Texas grows. That's very important, that we not leave people out on the basis of whether they happen to live in one of these 35 counties or not. So that's part of it. I think this may be our last question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tony DeLisi with Ernst & Young's Economic Development Team. And this is a good closer because I don't think we're going to answer this all the time. But Jenna touched on this. We're talking about challenges around local government and all of the collaboration and all the many municipalities and counties between all these areas, as well as with the state government. And these are decisions that are sort of outside of the control of the folks on this panel, economic development groups, but where critically we're going to need to see investment and collaboration. How can economic development groups, the business community, other folks really push to see that collaboration between all of these entities and from the state?
Thank you for that question, because that is the logical end to what we were discussing here. What structures of collaboration, of overarching, integration of regions geographically, topics, transportation, water, et cetera, should exist. We have nascent conversations between the county judges. We have ongoing conversations between the mayors, who are very close, multiple mayors. We have transportation systems, MPOs, and chambers of commerce and economic development organizations, all of whom need to be working together. And conversations are going on, but I don't think anybody yet has broken the code, figured out the structure.
Yeah, so it's interesting just to kind of add to your dynamic there. In San Antonio alone, we have 17 school districts, we have 27 suburban cities, we have 25 chambers of commerce. I believe, and Gary and Ed and I were just talking about this the other day, we were ideating around it because we were attempting to kind of figure out what's the evolution of our Opportunity Austin Greater SATX Partnership 2.0. And we were thinking through it, and they said, as economic development organizations, we need to lead, because we aren't necessarily just supporting a membership base. We are not making decisions based off of a specific group of people. We represent the region. We represent product development, the product that we're selling, and we represent growth in the region. And so we need to play more of a leadership role in that regard, and we need to bring the partners to the table, because for us, it's not competitive. All of these different organizations are providing a service that benefit us in the long run, right? If it's a chamber of commerce advocating on behalf of the business climate, or if it's an MPO working on better transportation. And so for us, they all provide unique services, but we can play more of a leadership role in bringing them to the table so that they can see past their specific silo or a turf, if you will, and rise above it for the greater good of not just the San Antonio region, but the broader mega region. So I think the short answer is leadership. And
does that mean that you're going to collaborate together, this group, to bring, look, the county judges are busy. They have all kinds of things. Some things come up every day. They just don't have the time. The mayor's distracted by 1,000 concerns. You have the economic portfolio, literally you sitting at this table, at this panel. You have the continuity and the ability to sort of keep the focus, if you will.
If I could add, I just want to commend Jenna. I mean, in my first week, she reached out to me to set up a meeting to talk about a shared agenda and how we collaborate. And I think that's a really sign for how important this is and how honest we are about, the work that's ahead. So I'm looking forward to that, what we're going to do together. But I think, to your point, I think there needs to be a task force of political leaders and economic leaders that come together and have a shared agenda and start setting out objectives.
A lot of these kinds of things depend on the moment. There's an idea, but the time is not right. But I think we're getting to the point where more and more people understand the time is right. The time is now. And failure to act now leaves things. There comes a point when the spiral of congestion and downward is so great that it passed. The moment passed. So
Nobody's even mentioned the presidential debate, being held at Texas State. I mean, all eyes will be on the mega region.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Matt, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Just want to thank our panel today, Secretary Cisneros, for helping us convene this. Deeply appreciate that. And of course, a start to many conversations we'll have here at the Tribune about this region and about growth around the state. So thank you very much.